On the 27th of February 2019, a summit took place in the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi between North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un and then US President Donald Trump. There was much about the summit which was unusual. For one thing, a bilateral meeting between leaders of both countries was rare. It only occurred once before, the previous year, in fact, when the same two figures had met in Singapore. The fact that the meeting was taking place in Vietnam was strange too, some analysts concluding that this was due to its relatively friendly relations with North Korea and an attempt by Trump to massage relations with a country which the US had relatively recently been at war. But perhaps strangest of all was the fact that Kim Jong-Un had made the journey from North Korea to Vietnam, along with his entourage, entirely by train. Yep, the sprawling journey across the vast Chinese hinterland from Pyongyang to Hanoi, a route of some 4,000 kilometers, had taken Kim Jong-un 65 hours, significantly more time than the summit actually ended up lasting. But before anyone would be tempted to believe that this mammoth route was conducted by train out of respect for the environment or to demonstrate the superior rail connectivity linking the three countries, neither of those was actually the case. Because in actual fact, both leaders had traveled to Vietnam in their preferred and most secure mode of transport, one reserved for the exclusive use of the head of state and hailed as the best protection for them against would-be attacks. For the US, this was the Boeing VC-25, a one-of-a-kind aeroplane built to transport US presidents since 1990, often better known by its call sign, and that of course is Air Force One. But for North Korea, this is the Taeyangho, a massive armored train complete with weapons and defense systems, munitions departments and dormitories, and which often goes by its own nickname, the Moving Fortress. The Taeyangho trains have a long and storied history in the transport of North Korea's governing Kim dynasty. With its name coming from the Korean word for the sun, the first Taeyangho came into use soon after the establishment of the state in the early 1950s for the personal transit of the first supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Il-sung. It is thought that the reason for its development was due to the elder Kim's dislike of flying, but may have also been a nod to the first international gift he received en route to power, a train carriage donated by Joseph Stalin in 1945. One way or another, the first supreme leader of North Korea continued to use the trains extensively throughout his life, both inside North Korea and outside. He even used the Taeyangho to travel all the way from North Korea to Eastern Europe in 1984, where he visited every single socialist country in the Eastern Bloc on a marathon train tour. Still, the first supreme leader was not averse to using air transport and began to do so more extensively later in life, such as traveling to Moscow to meet with Mikhail Gorbachev in 1986. But the trend of using armored trains continued with his son and successor Kim Jong-il, who was known to have a keen fear of flying and who is actually thought to have died on board one of these trains in 2011. And it would also appear that despite advances in aerial, maritime and overland transport, the use of the Taeyangho has not abated with Kim Jong-un, who uses the trains every bit as often as his father and grandfather did. With that said, the current leader, like his grandfather, is known to use air travel on select occasions, having done so on visits to both China and Singapore, and even being shown piloting an Antonov AN-148 airplane in state media footage from 2014. In fact, Kim Jong-un has his own private plane. Of course he does, which he could use on overseas visits if he chose to. Known as the Chamai-1, the word for the national bird of North Korea, his personal craft is a Russian-made Ilyushin-62 from the Cold War era. But given the age of the model, analysts question its reliability, as well as its possible vulnerability to attack. As for a leader as security-conscious as Kim Jong-un, vulnerability in transit is not a matter likely taken very lightly. So naturally, one would say, the answer to this would be to find a new model of plane, one with upgraded defense capabilities and state-of-the-art radar and threat detection equipment. Well, if you thought that, you'd be wrong. One strategy used by the Supreme Leader is to simply set off a decoy Chamay-1 to fool a would-be attacker into tracking that plane instead of his own. On at least one occasion, the Chamay flew out from Pyongyang while Kim Jong-un was safely aboard an Air China 747, a courtesy of North Korea's ally, the People's Republic of China. But the more common strategy used by Kim Jong-un to ensure his protection on his rare trips abroad is to travel instead by train, specifically the Taeyangho, due to all of its defense capabilities. And defense capabilities, it absolutely has, in droves. The train length varies according to the number of carriages it carries, but it generally has between 10 and 20 carriages, amounting to a length of between 310 and 560 meters. By any metric, that is a big train. The train's nickname, the Moving Fortress, is absolutely appropriate. In short, it is an army barracks and munitions depot on wheels. The train is equipped with short and medium-range weaponry, as well as extensive small arms. Its carriages are complete with bulletproof windows, and its walls and floors are reinforced with steel plates to protect against explosive attacks. Its main armament consists of defensive weapons such as anti-air and anti-tank guided missiles, and its secondary armament includes mounted machine guns, as well as up to 100 military personnel. Furthermore, its carriages include a space for at least one Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the preferred vehicle of Kim Jong-Un, as well as a US-made MD-500C helicopter, reportedly illegally obtained to facilitate escape in the event of an attack. Perhaps given how laden it is with weapons and with guards, the train is extremely slow, reportedly crawling along at a paltry 55 kilometers per hour. This explains the length of Kim Jong-un's travel across China to meet Donald Trump, a journey which normally would be accomplished by a train in a much shorter amount of time, given China's saturation with high-speed rail services. The moving fortress also monopolizes transport in locations it travels through. It is thought that there are a total of 19 railway stations across North Korea, which are accessible only by the Taeyangho, and it is also known that the electricity of railway stations being used by the train is turned off when the train is nearby in order to inhibit the movement of any other trains from its surrounding area. This is something which has been done even abroad, and the passage of the Taeyangho is also accompanied by a complete media blackout in order to keep the journey obscured. Kim Jong-il's trip to China in 2003, for example, wasn't announced until days after it occurred, and when he traveled to Russia in 2009, local photographers were reportedly banned from documenting the journey, and entire towns in Siberia were instructed to remain indoors until the train safely passed. It is also thought that the train does not travel singularly, and that two other trains travel together with the Taeyangho in a 3-train set, one to check the tracks, and which travels ahead by around 7 minutes, and another to follow up the Supreme Leader's carriages with logistical support, including Soviet-made Il-76 transport planes and Mi-17 helicopters. According to the South Korean outlet Chosun Ilbo, this results in the total train convoy comprising as many as 90 rail cars. In addition, when departing abroad, an advanced group of North Korean operatives will travel ahead of the set in order to inspect outlying train stations, sweep them for potential threats, and make all necessary disruptions to its regular service in order to facilitate the passing of the Supreme Leader. There are 2 crossing points with neighboring countries which the Taeyangho uses, one of these being the Sino-Korean Friendship Bridge located at the border with China, and the other being a bridge on the border with Russia close to the eastern Russian city of Vladivostok, which is creatively also known as the Friendship Bridge. Meanwhile, the train is thought to have a decidedly opulent interior and a lavish traveling experience for its passengers. According to former Russian military commander Konstantin Polakovsky, who rode with Kim Jong-il on the train in 2001, it was possible to, quote, order any kind of Russian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and French cuisine on board. The train features a restaurant serving fine French wines and dishes such as fresh lobster, which Polakovsky claimed were transported to the train during its transit to ensure the availability of fresh delicacies, while cases of red wine from Bordeaux and Burgundy were also flown in from Paris. The train also has a karaoke room and several lavish halls allowing for entertainment and relaxation on board. Kim Jong-un has also been known to welcome dignitaries and heads of state on board the train when traveling abroad, with a Chinese delegation being photographed conversing with the Supreme Leader in one of the train's salons in 2018. Admittedly, traveling abroad is not something the Supreme Leader does very often, with his next known visit abroad after the Vietnam trip coming a full 4 years later when he traveled to meet with Vladimir Putin in Russia. And once again, he did so on his train. Now, it must be said that there is a certain logic to the rather obsessive use of train transport by North Korea. Owing to the development of flight trackers, trains have been judged by military analysts to be a safer and stealthier way of traveling for world leaders, especially in hostile countries or war zones. As an example, travel to Ukraine by airplane has been largely curtailed since the beginning of Russia's ground invasion, with figures such as President Joe Biden and Ukraine's own President Volodymyr Zelensky generally having traveled in Ukraine by rail. Some reports have suggested that even Vladimir Putin has traveled more regularly by rail since 2021 due to concerns about his own security. In short, irrespective of any technological advancements taking place in the field of transportation or indeed of military defense, it seems that the use of the moving fortress as the preferred means of travel for the leader of the DPRK is unlikely to change anytime soon.